Hey, this is Pete Saronis with Dotson Bridges. Our cities, communities, and citizens depend on technology each and every day. And while the world continues its transformation into a smart network of networks, we must become informed and educated on the opportunities and threats. Rob Roser of the Idaho National Laboratory and Rick Peters of Fortinet, our sponsor for today's episode, will discuss this very topic. I hope you enjoy the conversation. We are super excited and fired up for you to be joining us. We have an informational, educational, and enlightening opportunity today. A discussion with Mr. Rick Peters of Fortinet, Mr. Rob Roser of the Idaho National Laboratory. We're going to talk about what's happening today and in society, and that being critical infrastructure has never been more front and center. This is our power grid, folks. This is the water systems. This is the automobiles, the planes, the trains, the communications that we depend on each and every day, and how cybersecurity, physical security, supply chain, terms that might be foreign to some, but relevant when you read about it in the news media, are things we need to understand. And we couldn't have two better resident experts on today's episode, kind of breaking it down for us, distilling it for us, and helping us understand it. We like to storytell, and we hope you walk away with a few light bulb moments. I spent 25 years in the federal government. I was fortunate to be the chief technology officer at two cabinet level agencies. And Rob Roser and Rick Peters, colleagues of mine, Rick at his time at the agency, the National Security Agency, and Rob in his incredible journey through the National Laboratory ecosystem, really, I hope you understand and can feel today, represent the symbiotic relationship between the public and private sector and how important it is to have trusted relationships. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about each individual, and then I hope I don't butcher anything, but I'm going to start here with Mr. Rick Peters, Chief Information Security Officer, Operational Technology North America for Fortinet, a company that is a heck of a lot more than what some folks think is a firewall company, and we're going to find that out. Rick spent more than 37 years in this cybersecurity, global partnering, if you will, community. He has worked across foreign, domestic, and commercial industries at the National Security Agency and now with Fortinet. You just have to look at his bio, folks, on LinkedIn and see this breadth of knowledge. He had roles like Chief of Staff for the NSA Cyber Task Force. He was charged with the integration of cyber and cryptologic solutions for the U.S. Air Force Europe and in Germany and Air Force's bases here, there, and everywhere. An incredible talent. Super excited to have you, Rick, and looking forward to the conversation. Oh, he does hail from one of my alma maters, Johns Hopkins University, where he has a master's degree in engineering management, in addition to a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical and electronics engineering. So he can geek out, but boy, has he had an incredible walkabout. So Rick, welcome.
Thank you, Pete. It's great to be here.
Fired up, fired up. All right, Mr. Rob Roser, a friend of the Dotson Bridges family, Chief Data Officer, Chief Information Security Officer, Director for Information and Knowledge Management. We'll get into all of those titles and the significance at our Idaho National Laboratory. A particle physicist, 25 years at Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory, another one. So what an experience, where he was the CIO, the Chief Information Officer. He served as a project scientist for the lab's $2.6 billion flagship project, Long Baseline Neutrino Facility, LBNF. We're going to use a lot of acronyms today. You can Google all this stuff at inl.gov and at fortinet.com. Rob's history, I can speak from my own personal relationship of working with him when I was at the DOE and post. He's an educator. He is a storyteller. He's filled with passion, just like Rick, and purpose. So in terms of where he's been and what he's done, from Fermi Lab to now at INL, to his time and support of the American Physics Society, he hails from the University of Rochester, where he has a PhD in experimental particle physics, a master's in experimental physics, and yes, summa cum laude in physics, that is, from the University of Connecticut. I won't hold it against you. I'm a Big East guy. Rob, Villanova, UConn, kind of back in the mix. So with March Madness ahead of us, it's going to be a fun time. So welcome, Rob Roser.
Hi, Pete. Hi, Rick. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
You bet. You bet. We're so honored to have both of you. So Rick, I'm going to pivot to you. I like to break in the who is this individual, what's he doing at Fortinet and why, but it starts with your journey. Can you speak about one, why and what excites you about Fortinet and how this time in government shaped your wisdom, of course, but your passion and purpose to keep pushing the agenda to serve that greater good that we talked about.
Sure, Pete. You know, I think you've said it already, that key word, and I think it's true in every career journey, is you have to have some passion for problem solving in whatever capacity you're in. You know, spending almost 4 decades in the intelligence community, I was very blessed and fortunate to have those incredible array of experiences, right? They broaden you, sharpen your knowledge and your charge in a variety of directions, from offensive targeting to defensive national critical infrastructure. You know, you wrap that up and you go, what's next? And for me, it was an exploration at first, and discovering Fortinet was like turning a page and going, wow, hey, there's something out there that I could really sink my teeth into, but why Fortinet? And the attractiveness to me was that they were presenting their penchant for problem solving, which of course was, you know, foundational for me. And by that, I mean, they had an approach to working in the IT and OT security solutions, cybersecurity solution space that I thought was on point. First, they don't fly solo. They understand that this is, the table stakes really are around partnerships. You know, nobody's out there with a complete solution saying, hey, if you plug this in, you're going to solve your critical infrastructure problems for energy and utilities and transportation and manufacturing, and oh, by the way, smart cities, buildings, and campuses. Oh, we've got it all figured out. And so I love it when we start to talk about ecosystems and connectivity, and realizing that, you know, today the challenge is figuring out how to solve problems, but also to recognize that purse strings are tight. So we have to be able to work with our customers to roll up the sleeves and really think about what it is that they're trying to solve first, understand where they are on their cybersecurity journey, and then help them advance down the field, if you will, to use a football metaphor. You know, the other piece of it has been an incredibly fast 3 years with Fortinet. They're an engineering organization, a little geeky like me, and they're constantly investing in growth and technology. And that's a differentiator in this space. Yet they're respectful of the difference between the value systems. IT and OT leaders don't always see eye to eye. They're different value systems. It's interesting. You mentioned the journey. You know, roads cross. And in my history, a lot of paths crossing with INL. The Idaho National Laboratory was a place where we did a lot of research and work back 20 years ago when I was working offense against SCADA and industrial control systems. So that's not foreign to a national lab. You call them a crown jewel. Absolutely. You have to have places to work and research and solve these hard problems. So it's exciting, but I think the bigger picture is the table stakes are high today, Pete. Rob, I know, knows that more than many. And, you know, we really have to focus on raising the bar, not just here for our national level, but globally. Citizens around the globe depend on these services, and they want to be able to trust. Mm-hmm. And you can read the headlines. Even the small municipal situations that pop onto the radar illustrate the propensity of the bad actor to try and accomplish an objective, whether it's just to demonstrate capability or actually cause harm or disruption. So there's a lot going on out there, Pete.
Yeah, no, Rick, I wrote down a few things. I mean, and some of the terms we'll break down: IT, OT, information technology, operational technology, smart cities. Folks, think of the smart cities as an ecosystem. Yes. Rob and I have talked about this, you know, technology underpinning the sectors that provide societal and economic value. That's sort of what we hope to convey today. And then SCADA ICS. SCADA is the one I never always am, or I'm rarely ever able to remember, but SCADA just sounds cooler and it's simpler. So we'll get to some of that. But thank you for setting that table and those table stakes, Mr. Rick. So Rob Roser, same question to you: your journey, your passion, your purpose. What brings you that joy about serving at one of our crown jewels each and every day?
Mission and purpose, to be quite candid. So Idaho National Lab, Pete, is, as you know, is the nation's lead laboratory for nuclear energy research, development, demonstration, and deployment. We engage in the mission of ensuring the nation's energy security with safe, competitive, and sustainable energy systems, as well as national and homeland security systems. So we're a broad laboratory. We're located Idaho Falls. The lab itself is about the size of the state of Rhode Island. So it's a big place. We have about 6,000 employees at the laboratory, and we do a lot with a lot of different people. One of the beauties about working at a national laboratory is that you get to work with some of the nation's brightest minds, and on missions that matter, that people care about. And so I've been lucky. I've been first at Fermi National Laboratory. There, the mission of the lab was really to understand how the universe came about, sort of answering one of the most fundamental questions there is how are we here? How did this all happen? And so we use large accelerators and computers to sort of break down that problem and try to figure things out. With me, you know, our vocabulary is quarks and leptons and strong force and those sorts of things. I got a chance to participate in the discovery of the top quark, and got a chance to participate in finding first evidence for this Higgs boson. And now I've rotated because I wanted to work more in this energy space. And after 25 years, it was time to make a little change and move out west, pursue a little passion of mine, which is fly fishing, as well as work on a wonderful mission. And so that's why I'm here, and happy to be here. The interesting thing I would say about what I've learned about the National Lab System in the last 25 years really is 25 years ago, the 17 national labs were all islands, sort of working, you know, close proximity, you know, doors sort of closed, and just keeping their heads down, working mission. And nowadays, nothing could be further from the truth. We're now trying to be very collaborative, both with the other national laboratories as with the industry, in order to move the mission faster, to try not to hold on to key things, but to push it out there, to let other people profit from what we're doing, and for us to learn from what other people are doing as well. You know, we're not the best at everything. We recognize that, and so we need to leverage other people's skills as well. And so that's sort of the big change that I would say over my career.
Yeah, well, Rob, I know a lot of that, and I again commend you and love having you in any forum talk about the history of the national laboratories, the experience working at those. And folks, you know, you can see this if you were to go out and look at the websites, but Fortinet's mission statement, demonstrating ongoing mission to redefine cybersecurity from IoT, the Internet of Things, to the cloud with expanded patent portfolio, yada, yada, yada. What an incredible mission that speaks to academia and pushing the envelope and moving the needle. So we will get into some of those products and things that we know are so relevant to the power grid, again, to the critical infrastructure we talk about. I also want to give a shout out to Idaho National Lab when you think about their mission to discover, demonstrate, and secure innovative nuclear energy solutions, other clean energy options, and critical infrastructure. And the opening remark about the symbiotic relationship of government, academia, industry, I like to call it the iron triangle. Equal parts have to be in balance or counterbalanced as we're pushing that science, art of the possible with, hey, we have to protect the assets today, the information. And I think both of you, we will get to that here in a minute. Rick, let me jump back to you for a minute. Fortinet, I like to do this, and for Rob and, you know, the here and now, the next 3 to 6 months, or maybe what you're excited about this new year in a time of transition. What are some of the focus areas that you would like to express to a community that, yes, we have a new president, but we're also still dealing with the pandemic, and that has created this new normal, the remote work environment. What are some things that Fortinet is excited about over the next few months?
So, and I'll speak broadly. I won't just focus on operational technology or IT for that matter. I think it's important to have a vision, right, for what you're expecting. And that means you've got to stay engaged and do a lot of networking. And that means getting out there, rolling up sleeves, talking to executives, talking to technologists, those who have skin in the game, to understand what's top of mind. I mean, it's easy to say, well, sure, 12 months ago, a pandemic was emerging and there was rapid innovation. I mean, by rapid, measured in weeks, sometimes days, as industries tried to figure out how to pivot and be able to accomplish their businesses, their work, their missions. I love what Rob said earlier, the missions that matter, those all carry on daily. And that iron triangle that you mentioned, the services, government, industry, all working and collaborating at speeds that were unprecedented because it had to. And that wasn't just a national situation, that was a global situation, right? Everyone's trying to figure out, how are we going to do business in this new dimension, with this new set of challenges? And that's where you can start to think about how to problem solve using economy of scale, thinking about what you already have in your hip pocket and figuring out how to leverage it to a greater degree. I always say, start with what you have. Make sure you're getting the best return on investment on your present adaptation of cybersecurity defense mechanisms or capabilities, or however you want to represent that, and grow from there, because that allows you to sort of take an inventory, know yourself first, make sure you understand what you've already paid for, get the most from it. A simple example, I was working with a small industry that knew they needed to go from just a handful of VPN connections to over 100 overnight, and didn't realize that they already had the solution right there. Their next generation firewall would scale, and they didn't have to spend a nickel. It was just a setting. And that's the beauty of innovation. By studying what you already have first, it then allows you to say, well, okay, I can address that problem, but then what's the longer term scenario look like? Certainly, we'd all agree today that post the pandemic, the way we accomplish business is going to be a great deal different. We've learned lessons already, some positive lessons. In these crises, you better benefit and figure out, what have you gained from it? It's not just all of the negative baggage. It's, how can we be more efficient? How are we looking for ways to examine trends? Heading into 2020, this notion of digital transformation and connectivity between what traditionally air-gapped or separated systems was already happening across all of the industrial areas. So that was happening, big challenge, right? We're wrestling with how to protect critical infrastructure. I say how to protect the cyber physical. I know we're going to explore that a bit more, but it really became important to say, well, where are the gaps? If we start to talk about things like visibility, control, situational awareness, these are foundational elements that any reference architecture should build in, right? So that's how you start. And then you got to get busy trying to figure out, how can we get the best return on investment, because the executive who's got to make that call wants to understand, how do I measure?
So let me jump in there and Rob, the question to build off that, Rick mentioned partnerships, economies of scale. Obviously, from a critical infrastructure standpoint, resilience is the end game. I think that we as human beings and those in the audience today, we hope that you're going to glean from this a why should I care? That there's a national lab focused on this and has for so many years, and why Fortinet is a company that might have had its roots in, firewalls, which is, I think, the term we all can sort of understand. But what does it mean to me, and why should I care? Maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they just should know, Rick, that the lights will turn on, and that's what is what's most important. And life and lives are being saved. We saw this past week or instance down in Texas, where Mother Nature sometimes reminds us that we aren't as resilient as we need to be when it comes to critical infrastructure. So Rob Roser, just my comments. I love jumping in on these insights. The National Laboratory, aside from the vast mission, you mentioned nuclear security, you've mentioned the wireless communications, Rob. How do you feel about this notion that the technology due diligence, pushing the envelope, the partnerships that are needed? How do you instill that in your organization? And what do you personally do to make sure that you're staying current, and what matters to you the most?
Right, so all good questions. I mean, it's a complicated environment right now, especially post or in the middle of the pandemic, when the pandemic hit, the laboratory moved 3,000 of its 5,000 people to a remote setting. So all of a sudden we had to learn how to be efficient, be effective, communicate with each other in a reasonable manner while living in each other in our basements, essentially, right? And so we went from, like what Rick said, a small maybe 20 or 30 VPN connections a day to 3,000 literally overnight, and we had Microsoft Teams sort of already deployed, but we weren't really using it very efficiently or effectively because you didn't really have to. You could just meet people in a conference room, and now all of a sudden overnight there were no more conference rooms, physical conference rooms. They were all virtual, and we had to teach people how to do that. And you know, the phrase of 2020 was you're on mute, right? And that sort of thing. So there's lots going on. We're working very hard to, you know, I hope, I pray that we all learn from this pandemic, and that as we do business going forward, we don't regress back into the old ways of doing things. I would say, at least many of the cultures that I've been in, remote workforce has been treated sort of as second or third class citizens, saying, well, I'm not sure we can trust them. You know, who's going to work if I'm not keeping my foot on their throat to make sure they're doing what I want them to do? And we've seen that's just not the case. People, we've been very efficient. We continue to accomplish mission even in these remote settings. And so I expect actually that we will learn from that. The advantage of that sort of thing is, while I love it here in Idaho Falls, maybe not everybody wants to live in Idaho Falls, and maybe I can start to hire some of the best and brightest that don't necessarily want to move here and still leverage their skills and expertise, right? And so finally to get to your question, right? I think the way it's critical to stay current. It means reaching out, talking to people, engaging, keeping your network going, in terms of not network in terms of physical, but your contacts, your professional network, and learning from each other. I mean, as you mentioned at the start, but I have two hats, right? One is Chief Data Officer, one is CISO, or Head of Cybersecurity at INL. And they sound disparate, but both are grounded with the underlying data. And so we're working very hard at INL to start to use our data better, to be more effective, to make data-driven decisions in ways that we weren't before, to start to quantify risk as opposed to just what's our gut feel as it pertains to risk, and essentially progress in that journey, if you will. So those are the things that are on my mind. I mean, we want to start to leverage moving forward, so artificial intelligence. You know, that's a journey. You know, you have to sort of walk before you run, which means you have to understand your data. You can't use these fancy tools if you don't train them properly, and if you don't train them properly, you get the wrong answer. And so you have to have the foundational elements in, and then you progress as you go forward. So that's where we are right now, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
anybody
well,
wants to join me, call me.
No, I love it. And I actually, you answered my second question quickly, which is going to be these roles. And maybe you can expound just a tad. I mean, when I see a Chief Information Security Officer at a national lab or in a federal agency or in a company, and also being the Chief Data Officer, I think that's unique. I mean, I could tell you in Washington, there are Chief Data Officers, and there's a council that's formed in the last year or so, and the importance of data and data sets and the volume, velocity, variety, veracity of it is everywhere. You know, Rob, I've heard you speak about the concept of a moat, and now we're going to get into a little bit of the geeky stuff, Rick. So please plan to riff off some of this. We hear zero trust architecture. We hear identity, credential, and access management. We hear about the threat landscape expanding. Rob, as a CDO and a CISO, can you just speak to, you did high level the correlation, but how is that impacting you as you're thinking about your technology roadmap and protecting the assets, people, right, and devices at the lab?
So that's a complicated question. So let's just break it down into a very simple example. And the simplest one I can think of off the top of my head is SolarWinds, right? So as people know, that was a big incident back in, I'll never forget, it was December 13th or 14th, it went public, that SolarWinds was compromised. And I don't want to get into the details of that, but I want to basically get into the details that in my mind, there's now a paradigm shift in cybersecurity, that malicious actors are now going to take a different approach. If they want to compromise a company, they're now going to go at it through supply chain and not necessarily try to get through the firewalls per se. So with that in mind, we as a country as enterprises are going to need to sort of understand sort of subtle differences in our underlying data from trusted sources, right? So we need to be able to look at our networks and look for anomalies that are coming from what we thought were trusted sources and identify that. And so there you tie data, you tie artificial intelligence, and you tie cyber together in a neat package. We're not very good at this right now. We don't know how to do it. I mean, 18,000 companies or so had a malicious version of SolarWinds on their networks, and only one, FireEye, figured it out. So that just goes to show you how hard it is. But that is going to be the table stakes going forward, and we're going to have to put our collective minds together to get better.
Wonderful. And let's tee that up, Rick. I'd like your comment on it, and just again, give a shout out to folks. You may think of Fortinet, as you should, as this global company that does security-driven networking, dynamic cloud security. These are some of the buzzwords: AI-driven security operations, zero trust access, all of the stuff that might be Greek, pun intended, Pete Greek. But why do I care? I think, Rick, can you expound on some of Rob's comments about this threat landscape expansion? How is the Fortinet technology roadmap starting to map towards, hey, bad actors are becoming more and more relevant, but we're also able to protect that landscape in a manner that should allow people to sleep well at night?
Sure. Rob's thoughts that he just shared are incredibly spot on. He are in really violent agreement on that landscape. The paradigm shift was already underway. It's just now more obvious.
Yeah.
Right. I'd say it's safe to say that, it's not an advanced technique to use payload to get on a target. And that's been demonstrated now. So now, in conversations with customers today, they all want to talk about, how do I trust? And when we were talking before, I was writing down that word. Earn trust is going to become a theme that's going to take on more attention, and it will prevail across different solution spaces. So as you build and connect capabilities that may have been separate or not part of an ecosystem historically, it'll all be about building trust, earning trust. Starting with zero trust network access, which everybody tends to want to shift. Well, that'll solve all of my problems. Well, in a sense, it solves part of the problem, right? Because whether you work in the intelligence community or industry or a national lab or whatever endeavor, the challenge is always understanding behaviorally what's going on in your environment. I'm going to sound like a prophet, but I've been talking to customers now for 3 years about behave as if your system's already been compromised, because the likelihood is it has in some way, shape, or form. So let's take steps to be able to outmaneuver the adversary instead of react and chase the adversary, because it's too expensive. And in operational technology, industrial control systems and supervisory control and data acquisition systems, SCADA.
There it is. There it is.
You can't, the stakes are too high. We cannot afford mistakes, and delays or lost response time is not just financially impactful, but it puts lives and workforce at risk. So again, the table stakes are high there. So when we start to break it down, it's really about ensuring that as we shift our focus, and I could come back to that term paradigm again, I've argued now for the last 2 years that data is that commodity of interest that's driving everything, right? Businesses want to be more efficient and effective in how they make their decisions. They want to pivot when they're in manufacturing. They want to be more efficient in how they maintain their cyber physical plants and their environments, because they're competing, right? And to be able to compete means you have to have access to data. That's translated into an explosion of enabled technology. You hear the terms Internet of Things or Industrial Internet of Things. These are technologies out there that allow us to capture data, information, and make decisions based on that. And that momentum has been underway for some time.
Yeah, Rick, let me jump in for a minute and just go back to Rob wearing your CDO hat a bit. And we're going to move into the segment on really critical infrastructure protection. I think this OT, IT discussion is a great way to kind of round out a lot of our discussion today. Rob, the cloud introduced an opportunity almost a decade ago for folks to house information or data, raw data somewhere that could be distilled. And how are you as a chief data officer trying to get your head wrapped around how can I make sense of it? You mentioned AI, but are there some techniques? Are there some methods that allow you to make sense of it from a R&D standpoint?
Well, so I guess, first of all, Rick made a number of great points, but let's talk about just data in general, first of all, right? There's been an explosion of data. And so how you manage it, digest it, and glean value from it is complicated, right? Companies that can handle that data well are going to have a huge advantage going forward. I've never been a big fan of the term big data because I don't know really what that means. I tend to define it not in terms of gigabytes or petabytes or exabytes, but rather whatever takes a company or organization out of their comfort zone is then considered big data. And I think the challenge for companies going forward or to deal with it is really to never have a big data problem, to try to make decisions, keep the data that's important, and then throw the extraneous or the noise away so that you don't have to do it. It'll be interesting to watch over the next 5 years or something. In my personal opinion, I think the cloud is going to be more revolutionary and change our lives way more than even the internet did. It's because of its capabilities. I think we're only now tapping what it can really do for us, and it's going to be exciting to watch and to participate in.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I will use that as a springboard to kind of get to what will hopefully be something educational for the group, folks. Here today, we're talking about this critical infrastructure, the operational technology, information technology. I'm going to ask my colleagues Rick and Rob to kind of dummy it down for me even. When I think of it, I think of the 16 sectors defined by the Department of Homeland Security. We mentioned earlier that it's the planes, trains, automobiles, the manufacturing, the water, the wastewater, the things we just expect to be safe and secure. And that's physical, cyber, that's supply chain. And then there's these critical functions that touch humanity. And I like to say, I turn the lights on, I hope they turn on. A snowstorm comes, I hope that I have heat. And we're constantly, again, reminded by Mother Nature that we're not always in control of this. But what we can do is work towards a more resilient critical infrastructure landscape. So Rick, let's go to you. Fortinet is so much more than a tech company. It's actually, I think, a company that is addressing the mission of critical infrastructure. Can you just, in a very high enough level for our audience, talk about why you've invested heavily in this OT/IT critical infrastructure domain?
Well, you said it before, and it's very important. There's a dependence out there on a global scale for these services, and lacking trust or not believing that we have readiness as a part of the equation causes fear and doubt. And we have to get out, and the way you get out in front of that is you have to be forward thinking. I love this idea, and I want to go back and leverage off the point Rob was just talking about with data. It really we got to take it up to the next level and understand what's happening behaviorally. It's not just plugging in devices and capabilities, network access control and endpoint detection and response and multi-factor authentication. All those are really cool terms, but there's more to it than that. It's understanding what's happening from the inside. When I sit down and talk to a board or an executive today, insider threat's still top of mind. That's not limited to the commercial world, but the oil and gas executives worried about the integrity of their environment, understanding what's happening behaviorally inside of my environment at any moment in time. They want to be able to trust that. So the table stakes are designing security in so that you get this situational awareness at the speed of business. So from the moment something happens behaviorally that I don't understand, it may not be malicious, but I don't understand it, I need to be able to quarantine it, need to be able to analyze it, understand it, and then respond to it. And there's two dimensions to being able to do that: on-prem, right, locally, and then relying on an intelligence service on the back end. I'm a big believer in, hey, you got to have a team out there doing analysis, building and I won't call it AI. I think there's a lot of machine learning going on right now. AI is coming, but it really is intelligence analysis and services and sharing of that intelligence. Because the more we can do that, and Fortinet likes to call it their security fabric, call it whatever you want, an ecosystem. It's the sharing of intelligence that allows me to understand what's going on in my environment and tying that back into the relatable information that I care about. How is what happened with SolarWinds going to affect my company or my business or my vertical? Can I trust the water that I'm drinking today? We've got lots of lessons learned from that. And it's hard to rebound, right? Trust lost is hard to regain. We've learned that over and over again. So I think those stakes are high. And it really does come back to something we started at the beginning, this notion of collaboration, working together, taking technology companies like Fortinet and then working together with the national labs to really study the problem, to peel back the layers of the onion to make sure that we are thinking ahead. It really is about putting ourselves in the mind of the adversary and saying, what are they going to do next? Let's think like them. Let's get out in front of the person who might seek to disrupt my business or cause public uncertainty and doubt about a particular service, and be able to then adjust and build towards confidence and resilience. I love that word. Resilience means I'm constantly looking forward. I'm not just sitting back feeling good about my situation today. I'm realizing that, those stakes are high, right? The adversary is going to continue to lean hard and they're going to lean forward. Ransomware, phishing attacks, all of those kinds of tools that everybody's now familiar with because they roll off the tongue are just the nature of what's happening out there. And we know it's not going to diminish, right? Because it's profitable.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it's profitable, but whether it's a nation state or a kiddie scripter, there's too much being made out there in terms of profit to accomplish those missions. And, we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but it's a great challenge, but I think we succeed collaboratively.
Yep. So let me go to Rob here. Rob, shout out to the lab. I've worked a good bit of time over the years with the critical infrastructure side of the national lab. And I know that while you have this broad swath of being a CISO, a CDO, you are a particle physicist. You understand the mission. You understand, Rob Roser, the operational technology needed for the instrumentation at a national lab that now is converging with the information technology world, where the Internet of Things, the industrial Internet of Things, while maybe it affords the actionable intelligence that Rick spoke to, the insights to distill, as you mentioned, Rob, you get the OTIT. Folks, the critical infrastructure protection mission at the INL, leading diverse solutions in industrial cybersecurity and grid resilience, it's part of their DNA. And shout out to Zach Tudor and team. The power and grid systems, the control systems, cybersecurity, the infrastructure resiliency. Please go read about INL. It has got a Homeland Security Directorate and an environmental management component. And here's Rob Roser, who's now protecting a lot of that inside and outside environment that's so needed for our incredible researchers to do their jobs. Rob Roser, hearing a lot of that, what can you share, just maybe it's personal, about the world that's evolving and this convergence of OT and IT? What are your thoughts on this and the recent events, even, the situation in Texas? What caused you to feel a certain way about the resilience in our country?
Yeah, so, people sometimes think that this is a new problem, or all of a sudden it's not a new problem. What's changed really is that as we go for more efficiencies, these industrial control systems that used to sit essentially isolated are now all networked. And so now we've tied things together and created, at some levels, ticking time bombs for us. In Eastern Idaho, if I look behind my house, there's a huge windmill farm. And historically, right, those windmills were controlled sort of one at a time, but now they've networked them and tied them all together. So there's maybe 100 back there. Now, if a malicious actor got in there and just changed the pitch of those blades, now all of a sudden there's going to be spinning faster than maybe the design ought to be. And with a single manipulation of a couple of bits, you can destroy hundreds of windmills at once, right? And so that's what's changed, right? It used to be that they weren't on the network, and now they have. And so I couldn't agree more with what Rick was saying is that for us to be successful, we're going to be successful only as a team, right? To start to share intelligence in ways that we haven't done before, to make sure each of us are aware of the different IOCs, indicators of compromise, to learn from each other in terms of how to protect from certain things. And again, to be resilient, to be able to anticipate people's moves by really understanding sort of what your what I like to call quiescent or nominal noise is on your network. And so you can quickly find deviations from it and react. I mean, Rick said it in spades, is time matters so much in this game, right? The quicker you can catch something or you can detect something, the better chance you have of containing it and doing very little. I mean, the thing I learned in Texas more than anything, right, is as going forward, we as a nation are going to need to embrace nuclear energy more than ever before, right? It's, these green techniques will be an important piece, but they can't do it alone. You're going to need to backfill with nuclear power.
Yeah, Rob, thank you for that. Convergence of IT and OT, Rick and Rob, to now the convergence of distributed energy resources. People like to say it's a political discussion, but I think renewables, I think nuclear, I think we know that even fossil is all part of a solution. And thank you for illustrating that with your wind farm example of what could go wrong and how important it is to embrace the innovation, but also protect it. And that gets back to the threat landscape. All right, so I actually have a quick question for Rob, just because it came to me. Rob, what's the most challenging part of your job with all these hats you wear?
Communicating with people, right? In the end, technology only gets you so far, but it's people and process that actually allows you to win the game. And so, while we are sort of technology leaders and we tend to focus or talk on these kinds of cases in terms of just the technology, it's really our people and the processes we put in around them and the tools we give them to be successful that will enable us to go forward. And so the teams that Rick has behind him, the teams that I work with at INL are the ones that are going to do it. It's not just technology, it's really these bright people thinking for themselves and acting.
So let me follow on one more to that, because I think this is a pearl of wisdom. Communication, people, process, technology. Being in the government for many years, I was sold to, and I always felt my job was to advocate for the mission and do whatever I had to do to seek out, do technology diligence. Rob, in your 8 hours, 12 hours a day that you work with these hats, what is something industry could be doing more effectively, or maybe yourself, to allow for those conversations like this to happen, where we're building bridges among government and industry to seek and solve problems?
Well, I think we need to change the conversation from just from going from a sales pitch, if you will, to becoming trusted partners, where we're trying to understand each other's backgrounds and problems that we're having and solving it, and sort of having the discussion from an organic level, if you will, and not just a sales call. I think that shift, the better companies have already made that shift, Fortinet being one of them, where they're starting to not just provide us a box, but rather provide an ecosystem and a trusted partner, so they're there with us every step of the way. Right? And
wonderful. No, thank you. Sorry, I was just eager to jump in and say, Rick, I know you have a Fortinet hat, but 33 years at the agency. How have you seen, or what recommendations, drawing on that, now being in a position to build a relationship with a national laboratory, getting to know Rob Roser on a first name basis? How is Fortinet changing its culture to address some of the things Rob just mentioned?
So it comes back to something Rob said before. The stakes require success in multiple dimensions. It's not just a technology problem, right? It's industries recognizing that they can tune their environments and have their workforce become an asset instead of a liability. Recognizing that the more we do that, right, the greater the awareness and the sensitivity to what's going on. Individuals can understand that they're part of the success of the organization, part of the success of delivering safe and reliable services around the globe. So that becomes kind of table stakes, right? And then starting to figure out how to change the way we think about our operations and processes to understand that trust needs to be the inherent feature within everything that we do. But at the same time, balancing that, because we understand that technology will continue to amplify what we're up against, right? It's not going away. The connectivity, the appetite for data will continue to grow. I want to, earlier Rob mentioned the cloud is just really a burgeoning area that's going to continue to grow, perhaps even explode, because it changes the way you think about networking and communication. So that dynamic is a part of how we have to treat the environmental problem. And I think, again, that comes back to thinking about an entire ecosystem, not trying to think about a finite premise. Hey, what's our whole environment look like? What do we understand about what's going on? The intelligence community didn't have a trap door specially designed to manage that problem. They've got the same people problem, the same oversight issues that the commercial industry does, that around the globe everyone's wrestling with. So no one's perfected it. Again, that's why collaboration is so important. Bringing the brightest minds, I steal a term Rob mentioned earlier, together, and realizing that we need to respect the diversity of culture and approach, to really roll up our sleeves and realize that, we can leave it a lot better than we found it. This is a generational thing. We're trying to raise the bar today.
Yep.
And I think that's where we need to be.
Yeah, I agree. And again, to close out, and we'll move into the parting shots, just spoiler alert, you guys, a minute to leave something that you took away from today as one of those tweetable moments, as I like to call it, light bulb moments. I just want to say, wrapping that to that comment up that you had, Rick, and I applaud the open government tenets are transparency, participatory, and collaborative relationships, if you will. The trust that has to be earned in a world that's focused on buying and selling. I think you both, thank you, articulated from an industry perspective, former government, and of course, Rob, been around the block, super collaborative, always willing to take a call and have a meeting. Bring something that matters to me. Do your homework is a phrase I hear quite a bit. And we'll see that maybe not today, but down the road, there could be an opportunity to collaborate. So thank you for hitting on those tenets, each of you. Okay, Rob Roser, parting shot. I like to keep it to as simple as and short as you want, or, maybe a minute max, but what would you like to leave with the audience today?
Well, I guess I would lead with that, technology and science is a critical part of our society. We need to embrace it and not fear it. I mean, there are aspects of it that are problematic, and we need to tame it. We need to leverage it for what it does best. But we can't forget the people, and the people are still the most important aspect of it. And you're not going to replace that with technology at all, right? And so I really appreciate having this discussion. It's always fun to talk to Rick and you, and I look forward to the next time we get together.
Fired up, man. You're awesome, Rob Roser. Rick Peters, parting shot.
I love the word balance. Balance from the standpoint of understanding readiness and investment in your people, investment in technology. I think that's what got me fired up 3 years ago when I decided to step outside of the safe confines of the intelligence community. And it's been exciting. The journey continues. I think we're challenged to continue to grow and influence the next generation of leaders that are going to come on and continue to carry this ball. I'll just finish with this. Last night, I had an opportunity to spend a couple hours with some students with my alma mater, trying to grow and influence that next generation. It's inspiring. They're going to help carry that ball forward, and they're going to continue to embrace these ideas, right, which are all about raising the bar. And at Fortinet, that's what gets me geeky. I love raising the bar.
Well, thank you. And you just gave me my parting shot, which is just to tie it all together in some way of connecting dots and building bridges. First of all, thank you both. You're amazing human beings. I feel your passion and purpose when we talk. And of course, knowing you each outside of this medium, I will say this, folks, we talked about technology underpinning the sectors that we depend on every day to provide economic, societal, whatever you want to define it as, value to life, to humanity. The technology, the culture, the intersection with humanity is so hopefully relevant, and we hope that you gleaned a bit of that today. Our cities are becoming smarter, our workforce is becoming smarter, and how we set up the next generation. Kudos to both Fortinet and Idaho National Lab for continued excellence in that domain. So thank you both. We will talk again soon. And again, have an incredible incredible rest of your journey at your institutions.